Welcome back to the deep dive. I've been staring at this stack of files for the last 3 days, and I have to admit, I'm having a hard time organizing my thoughts.
I get that.
Usually when we look at a case, there's a clear villain, a clear victim, and a timeline that, it makes sense.
There's a logic to it, even if it's a terrible logic.
Exactly. But this
Yeah.
this file, the murder of Dee Dee Blanchard and the case of Gypsy-Rose, it feels like looking into a funhouse mirror. Every time you think you understand what you're looking at, the reflection it completely distorts.
It creates a profound sense of cognitive dissonance. That's really the only way to describe it.
Yeah.
You're presented with two realities that absolutely cannot coexist, yet for 20 years in this quiet neighborhood in Missouri, they did.
Side by side.
On one hand, you have the saintly mother and the sick child, beloved by everyone. On the other, a prison warden and a hostage. And the really scary part is, to the outside world, those two realities looked identical.
And that's what we need to unpack today. We aren't just here to retell the true crime story that everyone kind of knows from the headlines. I want to understand the mechanics of this deception.
Right. How did it work?
How do you fake muscular dystrophy for 2 decades? How do you fool actual surgeons into removing healthy organs from your child? And I really want to understand how a community that prides itself on being close-knit can look at a house of horrors and see a Disney movie.
It's a study in psychology for sure, but it's also about medical system failure and ultimately about survival. And it all hinges on one incredibly jarring catalyst, June 14, 2015.
The day the Facebook post appeared.
Exactly. Up until that precise moment, the illusion was perfect. It was seamless. And then, on Dee Dee Blanchard's own Facebook account, the same account where she posted all these photos of charity trips and medical updates.
Right, the happy, brave mom and daughter stuff.
That's the one. A status update appears. It's succinct, it's vulgar, and it's absolutely terrifying.
That bitch is dead.
Just like that.
I remember seeing the screenshots of that in the case file. It's so visceral. It's not a cry for help. It feels more like a scream.
It is. And the comments underneath, I mean, you can see the confusion unfolding. The neighbors are confused. They're asking Dee Dee, are you hacked? Some are even joking about it at first.
Because the idea of violence associated with Dee Dee and Gypsy was just impossible to them.
It would be like seeing a profanity-laced tirade from Mother Teresa. It just didn't fit the schema that they had built up for years. But that post was the crack in the dam.
The very first one.
And it transformed what should have been a simple welfare check into a full-blown homicide investigation.
So to understand how we got to that post
Ah.
and to the body they eventually found in the bedroom, we have to go way, way back.
Yeah.
Because Dee Dee Blanchard didn't just spawn into existence in that pink house in Springfield, Missouri. She had a history. I'm looking at these records from Louisiana, specifically Chack Bay.
Yeah.
And the family dynamic here is, well, it's dark.
It is deeply troubled. Clauddine Dee Dee Pitre grew up in deep Cajun country. And if you look at the interviews with her family, her stepmother, her siblings, there was always something a little off.
A manipulative streak.
A manipulative streak, yeah. But it goes beyond just being difficult. There are allegations in the family history that suggest Dee Dee was experimenting with poison long before Gypsy was even born.
You're talking about her own stepmother, Laura.
Yes. The family has gone on record more than once stating they believe Dee Dee was poisoning Laura's food.
With what?
With Roundup.
Roundup. The weed killer.
The weed killer.
That's not subtle. That's like chemical warfare in the kitchen.
It's brutal. And the story is that Laura became chronically, mysteriously ill while Dee Dee was living with her. The symptoms, the vomiting, the weakness, they were consistent with poisoning.
And the pattern, this is what we need to flag right away.
Yeah.
So when the family confronted Dee Dee about her behavior, or when she felt cornered in any way, she
fled. She ran. And once she was gone, Laura's health miraculously improved.
So it establishes a baseline right from the start. Dee Dee views illness not as a tragedy to be overcome, but as a tool, a weapon.
And then she meets Rod Blanchard.
Right. She's 23, working as a nurse's aide. He's only 17.
A kid.
He's a kid. They meet at a bowling alley bar. It's this classic small-town whirlwind romance that moves way, way too fast. They get married in 1990. But Rod, he seems to wake up pretty quickly. He realized he was in way over his head.
I mean, he was 17. He said later that he got married for the wrong reasons.
Which seems to be a theme.
Right. It was a pregnancy scare that wasn't real, and then shortly after, a real pregnancy. But by the time Gypsy-Rose is born in July of 1991, they are already separated. Rod is out of the house.
But, and this is a really critical distinction we need to make early on, he wasn't a ghost. He didn't just disappear.
No, absolutely not. He was not an absent father.
The narrative Dee Dee spun later was that he was a deadbeat, an alcoholic, this monster who abandoned them. But the financial records, they tell a completely different story.
Rod Blanchard was paying $1,200 a month in child support, consistently.
Which, in the early 2000s, for one child, is a lot of money.
It's a significant amount of money. He was sending gifts, he was trying to call, he was trying to be involved, but Dee Dee was the gatekeeper. She controlled all the access.
There's this one detail about the phone calls that just breaks my heart. Rod calls on Gypsy's 18th birthday.
Yeah.
He wants to wish his now adult daughter a happy birthday, a major milestone, and Dee Dee just stops him cold.
She tells him, don't mention her age. She thinks she's 14.
Justin.
Yeah.
How does a father even process that? What do you do with that information?
It puts him in this terrible, terrible bind. Dee Dee tells him that Gypsy is mentally delayed, that she has the mind of a child, and that reminding her of her actual chronological age causes her immense distress and confusion.
So if he wants to be a good dad?
If Rod wants to speak to her, if he wants to be a good dad and not upset his fragile daughter, he has to play along with the lie. He has to participate in the infantilization or risk being cut off from her entirely.
So she weaponized his own desire not to hurt his daughter.
Precisely. It's a masterclass in manipulation, a really sick one.
Let's talk about how the medical construction began, because this didn't start with a wheelchair and a feeding tube. It started much, much subtler than that.
It started at 3 months old. Dee Dee became convinced that Gypsy had sleep apnea.
Which is, I mean, it's a common fear, right? New parents worry about their baby's breathing.
It happens, absolutely. But here's the divergence point between a worried mother and a dangerous one. She takes the baby to the hospital, they do the sleep studies, they hook her up to all the monitors overnight.
And the results?
The data is clear. The baby breathes fine. There is no apnea. She's a healthy infant.
The normal parent would be throwing a party. Well, thank God she's healthy.
Exactly. Relief. But Dee Dee isn't relieved. She's frustrated. She rejects the diagnosis of health. And this sets up the loop, the pattern we see for the next 20 years.
The pattern is when a doctor says nothing is wrong,
Dee Dee doesn't accept it. She finds a new doctor. She engages in this aggressive, relentless doctor shopping.
and the list of ailments just, it snowballs. I'm looking at this timeline from the file. It goes from sleep apnea to unspecified chromosomal disorders, then muscular dystrophy, epilepsy, hearing problems, vision problems.
It's an escalation of visibility.
What do you mean by that?
Well, sleep apnea is invisible. Nobody can see it. But muscular dystrophy requires props. It requires a walker. And then eventually, a wheelchair.
The wheelchair. That's the symbol of this whole case, isn't it? When did that start?
Very early. By the time she was a toddler, she was already being put in a walker. Then the chair. Dee Dee told her she was too weak to stand.
Can you imagine the conditioning?
It's absolute. If you are told from the time you are conscious, from your earliest memories, that your own legs will fail you, that they will collapse if you try to stand, you don't try to stand, you sit.
You believe it.
You believe it's a fact of your existence.
And then Katrina hits. 2005.
And nature, in all its destructive power, gave Dee Dee Blanchard a gift. A horrible, perfect gift.
They were living in Slidell, Louisiana at the time.
Right. Hurricane Katrina just devastated the area. Their apartment was damaged. But for Dee Dee, the floodwaters were the perfect eraser.
Because medical records don't float.
Exactly. When they were airlifted to a shelter and eventually relocated to Missouri, Dee Dee had a completely clean slate. She could walk into any new doctor's office and say, "My daughter has muscular dystrophy, epilepsy, and leukemia, but I'm so sorry, all the files were lost in the flood."
And who is going to challenge a Katrina refugee?
It would be monstrous to do so. The sympathy factor was just off the charts. They were airlifted out, and a doctor at a special needs shelter was the one who suggested they move to the Ozarks. First to Aurora, then to Springfield.
And when they land in Missouri, I mean, talk about rolling out the red carpet. The community didn't just welcome them, they practically adopted them.
They were the perfect victims. A tenacious, loving, single mother who had lost everything. A frail, sweet, sick child with this little squeaky voice. It just triggered every protective instinct in that entire community.
And the material support that followed is, frankly, staggering. Habitat for Humanity built them a house.
The famous pink house, custom built with a wheelchair ramp and even a hot tub for Gypsy's atrophied muscles.
A hot tub.
A hot tub.
And it wasn't just the house. I was reading about all the perks. They were getting free flights to Kansas City for medical appointments via charitable pilots.
They went to Disney World multiple times.
They got backstage passes to meet Miranda Lambert through the Make-A-Wish Foundation.
It was a lifestyle. The illness was the currency, and they used that currency to buy this life filled with gifts and attention and sympathy. And to keep the currency valuable, the illness had to be severe.
But this required intense isolation, right? She couldn't let anyone get too close.
No, because closeness breeds scrutiny. If anyone got too close, they might start asking questions.
Like the neighbors.
Especially the neighbors. She told everyone in Springfield the story about Rod being a deadbeat alcoholic who was, maybe even dangerous.
She effectively cut the supply line of information.
Completely. If the neighbors had known Rod was this decent guy sending checks every month, they might have called him, "Hey, Rod, just wanted to let you know Gypsy looks a little better today." And Rod would say, "What do you mean? She's not sick."
The lie dies with one phone call.
So she made sure no one ever had a reason to make that call. It was strategic isolation.
Okay, let's move into what you call living the lie. We've established the setup. Now I want to get into the gritty, day-to-day reality of what was happening inside that pink house.
Yeah.
Because medical abuse is such a sterile clinical term.
It is.
What was happening to Gypsy was torture.
It was systematic physical dismantling. I mean, let's just look at the physical reality versus the fiction she created. Gypsy was a healthy young woman. She was about 5 feet tall. She had normal muscle tone, or she would have if she'd ever been allowed to walk and run and move.
But Dee Dee shaved her head. Why? What was the logic there?
She told Gypsy and everyone else that her hair would just fall out anyway because of the powerful medications she was taking for her cancer and all her other ailments, so she shaved it to keep it clean and neat.
But it was really about the look.
It was 100% about the look. It was about stripping away her identity as a young woman and marking her as a patient. A bald head on a child or a young woman immediately reads as sick to everyone who sees it. It's a powerful visual cue.
And the teeth, I remember the photos from the evidence files. Her teeth were just crumbling. They were gray and black and broken.
It was horrific, widespread decay. Dee blamed it on Gypsy's poor hygiene or said it was a side effect of seizure medication she was supposedly taking.
But the reality was much simpler.
The reality was she was feeding a healthy adult woman Pediasure through a feeding tube.
Pediasure is basically sugar water with vitamins, right? For kids who need to gain weight.
It's very, very high in sugar. And that sugary liquid would sit in her mouth and combined with a total lack of proper dental care because Dee Dee controlled the toothbrush, the toothpaste, everything. It just rotted her teeth right out of her head.
And eventually they were all extracted.
Most of them, yes.
Let's talk about that feeding tube. She had a port, a G-tube, surgically installed in her stomach.
A peg tube, yes. Surgically implanted. For a girl who could chew and swallow perfectly fine.
And we know she could eat.
We know she could eat because in secret moments, late at night, she would sneak cupcakes or pizza that neighbors had brought over. But in public, Dee Dee would hook her up to the bag of Pediasure. It was a prop that required invasive surgery to install.
This is where I just get so stuck on the medical system, the salivary glands. This story, it keeps me up at night. Explain to me how a doctor, a surgeon, agrees to remove the salivary glands of a child who doesn't have a drooling problem.
This is perhaps the most damning example of how Dee Dee learned to manipulate the mechanics of medicine.
She played the game better than they did.
She did. She claimed Gypsy drooled excessively, which, to be fair, can be a choking hazard for someone with legitimate muscle weakness. Now, Gypsy didn't drool. So before the doctor's appointments,
She created the symptom.
she created the symptom. She would use a topical anesthetic.
Like Orajel for a toothache.
Something much stronger, most likely. Something she stole from a hospital or hoarded from a prescription. She would numb Gypsy's mouth and gums completely.
Oh my God.
Think about when you go to the dentist and you get a shot of Novocaine. You can't feel your lip. You can't control your own saliva. You drool.
So she drugs the kid's mouth, drags her into the doctor's office, and says, "Look, doctor, see, she's drooling everywhere."
And the doctor sees the drool. He sees the wet shirt collar. He sees the exhausted mother constantly wiping her daughter's chin. He trusts the evidence in front of his own eyes.
He doesn't think, did the mother just numb her child's mouth?
Of course not. Why would you think that? He thinks the salivary glands are overactive.
So they trade it.
First, they tried Botox injections to paralyze the glands. But Dee Dee, of course, claimed that wasn't working. So she pushed for the permanent solution.
Removal.
Complete surgical removal.
They surgically removed healthy organs based on a theater performance.
They did. And Gypsy woke up from surgery with chronic dry mouth, unable to produce enough saliva, which creates a whole host of other dental and digestive issues down the line. It is, and I don't use this word lightly, it is mutilation by proxy.
And the control wasn't just physical. It was so deeply psychological.
Yeah.
The hand-holding. In every picture, every video, you see Dee Dee holding Gypsy's hand.
It looks like affection.
It looks like, oh, she's such a protective, loving mama bear.
But it was a signaling system. It was a leash. Gypsy explained later that Dee Dee had a code. A gentle squeeze meant, I love you, or good job, you're playing your part well.
And a tight squeeze.
A tight squeeze meant, shut up right now. And a really hard, painful squeeze meant, you are going to pay for this when we get home.
So while she's smiling at the camera for the local news, she's physically threatening her daughter's hand out of view.
And Gypsy is terrified. She knows that if she says the wrong thing, if she uses her big girl voice instead of the high-pitched squeak that Dee Dee insisted on, there will be severe consequences.
The voice. That high, cartoonish, almost Mickey Mouse voice. That wasn't real.
No, that was trained. It was an affectation. Dee Dee insisted she speak like a little child to match the mental age Dee Dee claimed she had. If Gypsy's voice dropped into a normal register, she was immediately harshly corrected. It was all about performing helplessness.
This leads to the question everyone asks. It's the first comment on every YouTube video about this case. It's always some version of, why didn't she just stand up? Why didn't she just walk out of the house and say, Mom, I can walk?
And that question, while totally understandable from the outside, it ignores the absolute totality of the conditioning. You have to try and put yourself in Gypsy's headspace.
Which is almost impossible.
It is. She has been told since birth that she is broken. She didn't go to school after the 2nd grade. Her entire education came from Harry Potter books and her mother's lies.
She was completely isolated from any objective reality.
Completely. And Dee Dee told her lies that carried, in Gypsy's mind, the weight of law. She told Gypsy, I have paperwork that says you are mentally incompetent. If you ever try to tell the police or a doctor anything, they won't believe you. They will think you're confused. They will just call me and bring you right back to me.
So she believed she had no voice, legally or otherwise.
She believed she had no legal standing as a person. She believed she had cancer. She believed she needed the oxygen machine to breathe at night. It's a variation of Stockholm Syndrome, but it's so much deeper because she never knew a life before the captivity.
The captor was her creator.
Exactly.
But there were cracks. The facade wasn't bulletproof. There were these moments where the truth almost leaked out. And I want to spend some real time on Dr. Bernardo Flasterstein.
This is the pivotal what-if of the entire saga. It really is.
It's 2007.
Right. Dr. Flasterstein is a pediatric neurologist in Springfield. Dee Dee brings Gypsy in, and she's doing her usual routine. She has muscular dystrophy, she has seizures. Here's the long list of ailments.
But Flasterstein, he's different. He's diligent.
He's a scientist. He doesn't just listen to the mother's story. He looks at the patient. He runs the tests, the EMG, nerve conduction studies, blood work, and MRI. He is looking for the actual physical evidence of these diseases.
And what does he find?
Nothing. Zero. The tests are all clean. There's no muscle atrophy consistent with a girl who has supposedly been in a wheelchair for a decade.
And he saw her stand.
He saw her stand up on her own 2 feet. He knows her legs were strong enough to support her weight.
So he knows.
He knows the diagnosis is false. He writes in his notes that Dee Dee is not a reliable historian. He even does something no one else seems to have done. He calls the previous doctors in New Orleans.
The ones from before the flood.
Yes. And he finds out the original muscle biopsy from when she was a little girl was also negative. So he has proof that this is a long-standing pattern of deception.
So here he is. He has a child in front of him who's being subjected to fake illnesses, unnecessary procedures. He writes in his notes, factitious disorder imposed on another. He names the monster. So why doesn't he call the police? Why doesn't he call Child Protective Services?
This is the systemic failure that haunts the medical community about this case. Flasterstein later explained that he felt he wouldn't be believed. He was advised by his colleagues to use golden gloves.
Golden gloves. What does that mean?
It means handling the situation delicately to avoid a blowout. The fear, the very real fear in the medical and legal community, was that if he accused Dee Dee of abuse without a smoking gun like video of Gypsy running a marathon, Dee would turn around and sue the hospital for defamation and malpractice.
Or just run.
Or worse, she would just grab Gypsy and disappear to another state, another hospital, and the abuse would continue under the radar.
So the strategy was to play along, to appease her.
The strategy was to keep them in the practice, to slowly, carefully peel back the layers of the lie, to say, hey, maybe we don't need this medication anymore, to try and wean them off the fiction.
But Dee Dee is a predator, and a predator senses a trap.
Exactly. She somehow found his notes. She saw the words factitious disorder. She saw the doubt. And she did exactly what Dr. Flasterstein feared. She never went back.
And because he didn't make an official report?
No flag followed her to the next doctor. She just started fresh somewhere else.
That is infuriating. Golden gloves implies you're trying to win some kind of delicate boxing match. But this wasn't a sport. It was a hostage situation.
It highlights the extreme vulnerability of our medical system to a bad faith actor. The entire system is built on the assumption that parents want their kids to get better. It has no defense mechanism for a parent who is actively invested in their child staying sick.
There was another missed signal, too. The anonymous call in 2009.
Right. Someone tipped off the police. They called and said, hey, these people are using different names, different birth dates, and by the way, the girl looks perfectly healthy.
So the police go to the pink house.
They knock on the door. Dee Dee answers. And she spins the narrative that she had prepared for exactly this moment.
The abusive ex-husband story.
She tells them, my ex-husband is an abusive monster. We have to use different names and dates to hide from him so he can't find us and hurt Gypsy.
And the police just buy it.
Well, you have to picture the scene. They look at the wheelchair ramp. They look at the sick, frail-looking girl with the shaved head. They look at the terrified mother who seems to be protecting her child at all costs. And they buy it. They close the file.
If they had made one single phone call to Rob Blanchard.
Just one. Mr. Blanchard, we've been told you are hunting your family. And he'd say, no, I'm at work. I'm sending them child support checks. The whole thing ends right there. But they didn't make the call.
Gypsy, meanwhile, is growing up inside this prison. She's a teenager, then a young woman in her 20s. Hormones, curiosity, the internet. You can't suppress that forever. She starts to rebel.
It manifests as this desperate need for connection with the outside world. She sneaks online late at night. She goes into chat rooms. And she starts trying to find a boyfriend, someone to rescue her.
There was the incident at the sci-fi convention in 2011.
That was a major turning point. She met a man named Dan online. They arranged to meet at this local convention, and Gypsy actually tried to escape. She snuck away and went to his hotel room.
This was her break for freedom.
It was. But Dee Dee was always watching. She had a sixth sense for it. She tracked Gypsy down. She intervened. She produced the fake birth certificate showing Gypsy was a minor, even though she was actually 19 at the time.
So she threatened the guy.
Threatened him with police action for kidnapping a minor. The man, terrified of being charged with a sex crime, backed off immediately.
And the punishment for that escape attempt?
It was brutal. Dee Dee took a hammer and smashed Gypsy's computer and her phone right in front of her. And then the physical restraint escalated dramatically. Gypsy alleges she was chained to the bed for 2 weeks.
Chained
Chained or tied.
And
starved. And threatened that her fingers would be broken with a hammer if she ever touched a computer again.
There's one detail I found in the deep dive research that really shocked me. The BB gun.
It's often forgotten, but it's so important. Gypsy actually shot her mother.
With a BB gun?
Yes. At some point, she got her hands on a BB gun. And in her isolated world, she thought it was a real gun. In a moment of absolute desperation, she shot Dee Dee 10 times with it.
She was trying to kill her.
She was trying to end it. But of course, the BBs just stung her. They left welts. Dee Dee didn't die.
And what did Dee Dee do?
Tellingly, she didn't go to the hospital. She didn't call the police on Gypsy. She told the neighbors it was a robbery attempt by a stranger. She spun it right back into their victim narrative.
That shows that Gypsy was willing to use violence long before Nick Godejohn ever showed up on the scene. She was desperate.
She was a trapped animal chewing off its own leg to get out of the trap. And when the BB gun failed, she realized she needed something stronger. Or, more accurately, someone stronger.
And that's when Nicholas Godejohn enters the picture.
Right. They met on a Christian singles dating site.
Which is deeply ironic, considering where this all goes.
Nick is not your typical suitor. He had a documented history of significant mental illness, autism spectrum disorder, a very low IQ, and a history of disturbing behavior, including an arrest for indecent exposure. He told Gypsy he had a dark side.
And Gypsy, who was just starving for any kind of affection or attention, She latched onto him.
They built this entire world online. Late at night, after Dee Dee passed out from her medication, they would video chat for hours. It became this intense feedback loop of fantasy.
What kind of fantasy?
There were BDSM themes, a lot of role-playing. Nick had multiple personas, a good side and an evil vampire side named Victor. Gypsy played along with it. She created her own personas, like Ruby. They talked about eloping, about having babies, about this perfect life they'd have together.
But it wasn't just online. They did meet once, right? The Cinderella date.
March 2015. Just a few months before the murder, Nick traveled to Springfield. They staged an accidental meeting at a movie theater showing Cinderella, so Dee Dee wouldn't be suspicious. Oh, look, a nice young man who likes the same movie as us.
And this is where the physical relationship started.
In the movie theater bathroom, yes. Gypsy led him to the bathroom. They had sex. It was quick. It was in a public restroom. But for Gypsy, it sealed the bond. It made him real. He was tangible. And if he was real, then maybe the escape plan could be real, too.
So the plan shifts from let's run away together to let's eliminate the obstacle.
Yes. The murder plot begins to form.
June 2015.
Gypsy steals cash from Dee Dee's safe. Ironically, it was the child support money Rod had been sending. She mails it to Nick for a bus ticket. He arrives in Springfield.
The day of the murder. Walk us through the logistics of that night.
It's chillingly mundane. Gypsy and Dee Dee go to a doctor's appointment that morning. They go to a Dollar General to buy nail polish. They come home, watch a movie. Dee Dee goes to bed.
And Gypsy lets him in.
She unlocks the front door for him. She has the supplies ready. Duct tape, gloves, and a large serrated knife that she had picked out.
Does she do the stabbing?
No. She hands the knife to Nick. She tells him Dee Dee is in the bedroom. Then she goes and hides in the bathroom. She covers her ears so she doesn't have to hear her mother scream.
And Nick goes into the bedroom.
And he stabs Dee Dee 17 times. It's a brutal, messy, violent attack. Dee Dee screams for Gypsy. Gypsy doesn't come out until it's quiet.
And what happens next?
Yeah.
This is the part that disturbs a lot of people. The aftermath inside the house.
They didn't flee immediately. They stayed for a bit. There was sexual intercourse in the house, most likely in Gypsy's room, while her mother's body was cooling in the bedroom next door.
Gypsy later claimed this wasn't consensual, right?
She claimed she was in shock, that she just did what Nick wanted to keep him happy and calm. Nick claimed it was a consensual celebration of their new freedom. It remains a major point of contention between them.
Then what?
They cleaned up some of the blood, took about $4,400 from the safe, mailed the murder weapon to Wisconsin to hide it, and then they took a Greyhound bus north.
Leaving the body to rot.
For days. In the summer heat.
Which brings us full circle, back to the start.
Ta-da.
The Facebook post. Why post it? They were in Wisconsin. They were away clean. Why announce the death?
Gypsy explained this later. She said she couldn't bear the thought of her mother just lying there undiscovered for weeks. She wanted her to be found. She wanted a proper burial for her, despite everything.
It's a bizarre remnant of the bond they must have shared.
It is. It was a digital flare gun, a way to say, look over here, something terrible has happened.
So the police finally go in. They find the body. They see the empty wheelchairs. The community immediately goes into panic mode. Gypsy is missing. She's been kidnapped. She needs her meds.
The manhunt was intense. The working theory was that a predator had killed the mom and snatched the disabled daughter. But then Aaliyah Woodmansee steps up.
The neighbor.
Aaliyah was a young neighbor who Gypsy had secretly confided in. She knew about the secret boyfriend. She goes to the police and says, look, I know this sounds crazy, but she had a boyfriend online. His name is Nick. Here are the printouts of their chats.
And technology does the rest.
They trace the IP address from the Facebook post. It pings to a house in Big Bend, Wisconsin, Nick Godigin's house.
The police raid the house. They find them both. And the moment of truth, Gypsy stands up.
She walks out of the house in handcuffs. No wheelchair, no oxygen tank, just a normal, healthy young woman.
Sheriff Jim Arnott holds that press conference. I can still hear his voice in my head.
Things are not always what they appear. He had to warn the public, warn the people who were already setting up GoFundMe pages for Gypsy's rescue to stop donating.
The reaction in Springfield must have been nuclear.
It was absolute betrayal. You have to understand, these people felt duped on a massive scale. They had cried for this girl. They had given money, time, and resources. One neighbor said, how could I be so stupid? The Habitat for Humanity organization was publicly humiliated. It wasn't just a murder. It was a long con that made everyone in town feel like an accessory.
And what about Dee Dee's family back in Louisiana? The ones who suspected the Roundup poisoning all those years ago.
Their reaction speaks volumes. They refused to take possession of Dee Dee's remains. Her ashes were eventually mailed to her father, who flushed them down the toilet.
He flushed her ashes.
They said she got what she deserved and that Gypsy had already served her time in that pink house.
Wow. That is a final verdict if I've ever heard one.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the justice system. The legal system now has a nightmare on its hands. You have a murderer who is also a victim of unimaginable torture.
It's an incredibly complex legal knot to untangle. Gypsy was the mastermind in terms of the plot, there's no question. But she was also a victim of severe, prolonged, documented abuse.
Her defense attorney did a great job.
Her public defender, Mike Stanfield, did a brilliant job. He went back and got the medical records from before the flood. He proved the fraud from the very beginning.
And the prison medical staff proved the rest, just by observing her.
Right. Gypsy arrived in jail, and she thrived. She gained 14 pounds.
In jail. Most people lose weight.
Because for the first time in her adult life, she was eating real food, not Pediasure. Her hair started growing back thick and healthy. She didn't need a single medication they thought she did. The sick child just evaporated, and a healthy young woman emerged.
She ended up taking a plea deal.
Second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison.
But Nick didn't fare as well.
Nick went to trial. His defense team argued diminished capacity. They said, look, this guy has diagnosed autism. He has a low IQ. He was completely manipulated by this girl he loved. He was a weapon that she aimed and fired.
In the prosecution's argument,
The prosecution said, he bought the knife. He traveled hundreds of miles. He's one who physically stabbed her 17 times while Gypsy hid in the bathroom. He made a choice.
and the jury agreed with the prosecution.
They did. First-degree murder, life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 25 years for armed criminal action.
That disparity in the sentences bothers a lot of people. Gypsy is out, living her life today. Nick will die in a concrete box.
It raises really uncomfortable questions about agency and culpability. Was Nick a predator taking advantage of a vulnerable girl to live out a violent fantasy? Or was he a vulnerable, mentally ill man who was manipulated by a desperate survivor? The legal system decided he was the killer. But ethically, it's incredibly muddy.
So let's talk about the aftermath. Gypsy served 8.5 years of her 10-year sentence. She was released on parole in December 2023.
She said in an interview, I feel like I'm more free in prison than I was living with my mom. That quote right there, it sums up the entire case.
Prison was an upgrade.
It was an upgrade. She had friends for the first time. She had a job. She learned about her own abuse. She got married while she was incarcerated.
And now she's out. And she's a celebrity, essentially.
She's a media phenomenon, a reality TV star. She has millions of followers on social media. She married a man named Ryan Anderson in prison, separated from him very publicly shortly after her release, and is now reportedly with her ex-fiancé, Ken Urker. It's a complete whirlwind.
But what about the medical community? Did this case change anything? Have there been any real reforms?
There has been a lot of soul-searching. Dr. Mark Feldman, who is probably the world's leading expert on factitious disorder imposed on another, or FDIA, calls this case unprecedented. It's the first recorded instance of an FDIA victim killing the abuser.
And what about Dr. Flasterstein?
He has faced very heavy criticism. The Golden Gloves approach is now viewed by many as a clear failure of the duty to report suspected child abuse. It's become a cautionary tale for pediatricians. Trust your tests and your gut, not just the parent's story. If the evidence doesn't match the narrative, you have to protect the child, even if it risks a lawsuit.
So here we are. We've unpacked the fraud, the torture, the murder, and the messy aftermath. When you take a step back, what does this all mean?
To me, it means we have to rethink how we view victimhood. We're trained to see victims as passive, as people things happen to. We're also trained almost instinctively to trust mothers. This case just subverts both of those assumptions.
It shows a mother's desire for control can be lethal.
It can. And it shows that a victim, when pushed into a corner with no other options, can become dangerous.
It's the pressure cooker analogy you hear a lot with this case.
It's the perfect analogy. Dee Dee sealed the lid on that pot as tight as she could. She turned up the heat year after year for 2 decades. Eventually, the metal shatters, and the shrapnel hit everyone.
I want to leave our listeners with a final thought, because we all like to think we would have noticed. We think, if I was the neighbor, if I was the doctor, I would have seen the cracks.
But would you? Really?
That's the scary part, isn't it? If you look over your fence and you see a mom sacrificing everything she has for her sick kid, you don't see a crime. You see love. You see devotion.
We are socially conditioned to equate intensive care with good parenting. Dee Dee Blanchard hacked that social code. She used our own empathy, our own desire to help against us. So the question I think you have to ask yourself is, in a world where we are taught to believe what we see, how do we ever distinguish between a caregiver and a captor?
Because in this case, for 20 years, they wore the exact same face.
Things are not always what they appear.
Thank you for diving deep with us on this one. It's a heavy file, but a really important one. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.